Casual here. The developers are gearing up for the launch of Outriders in 8 days, and to get us suitably excited they are teasing us with endgame builds. The first one that they have tweeted about is the Fire Witch Pyromancer. Let's have a look at this fiery devil in action. The tease is continuing with the deep dive of this class spread over 3 days. They are keeping us keen. Very interestingly, day 2 went through the skills that this build uses, including 2 that we have yet to see in the game. Overheat was the 4th skill that we unlocked in the demo, which is an AoE attack and interrupt. Phaser Beam fires an enemy beam that deals damage that benefits from status power, inflicts burn and interrupts enemies that it hits, and has an AoE effect in a small radius around you. And finally, Eruption creates a volcanic eruption beneath a selected enemy, dealing AoE damage in a small radius around that point. The eruption spews lava which deals damage over time for enemies in the small area. As I said in my video on the Trickster skills and class tree, that I thought interrupts were going to be really important in the endgame when dealing with elite enemies. I think this build seems to be pointing in the same direction, with 2 of the skills having that ability. People Can Fly then went on to talk about the most effective rotation, which I'm putting up on the screen now. My first thought to seeing this was, holy shit, optimal rotations in a looter shooter? That is real MMO stuff right there, straight out of WoW or ESO. 2 games that in my time I've played a lot of, so I'm completely on board with this. My second thought though was that this could alienate a massive section of potential players. The reason I say this is because many players have gone into this game thinking that it is a gun game. Once you have played each of the classes enough though, you realise that this game is much closer in spirit to WoW than it is to Destiny, weaving skills of white physical damage being an absolute must. Something I suspect will be even more important in the endgame if you were to have any hope of clearing that challenging content. Now it's clear that certain classes are more ability focused than others, the Pyromancer being a good example where you should be spamming your abilities to ensure that there are marked enemies so you can heal, as well as to maximise your DPS through the dots you apply. So this approach does not preclude all gun mechanic fans, but it may explain why the reception to this game has been either very positive and hopeful to being completely hostile. It will also lead to more skillful players excelling at this game, being able to put out significantly more DPS than the average. Theory crafters will also have a ball with this game, as the gear sets can fundamentally change how your build plays due to their mods and their set bonuses. Let's have a look at the Lava Lich armor set that goes with this build. Some really important things jump out to me with this armor set. Firstly, it looks absolutely awesome, which has been a feature of all the legendaries we have seen so far. But what I want to draw your attention to is how each armor set boosts just 3 skills, in this case Overheat, Phaser Beam and Eruption. I find that interesting because clearly People Can Fly designed each armor set for a specific build. Each armor set will boost your performance in one of 4 ways, by increasing the damage output or leech skill, reducing a skill cooldown, increasing the number of times a skill can be activated before triggering its cooldown, or increasing your anomaly power and thus making all of your skills more powerful. Another thing to pick up on is the set piece bonus, which with this set boosts Eruption. That's great, but note that you only need 3 pieces of gear to activate it. So while in this case the developers have gone with 4 pieces of the Lava Lich armour and 1 of the Reforged, they could have used 3 and 2. It wouldn't activate 2 set piece bonuses of course, but it does show that there are some options for flexibility in your builds and rotations that you can play around with. For example, if you prefer a different ability over Overheat, or you are struggling with survivability say, you could swap out the chest piece for a piece that is better suited to your playstyle without losing the important set piece bonus. I love that flexibility and I'm going to have a lot of fun playing around with the different armour sets. Plenty of grinding to do before then though. So how does the armor set work with the rotation? Well, this set buffs Eruption significantly, taking a high damage skill and making it even stronger. Not surprisingly though, this skill is on a long cooldown, and that's where the armor set helps even more. Not only does it reduce the cooldown, but it also allows you to pop it more often before the cooldown triggers. With this build, Overheat is used as a starter because it buffs anomaly power. It also damages enemies in close range and marks them, allowing you to target them more easily with Phaser Beam. Then it's just a case of weaving overheats and phaser beam into the rotation so that you're always buffed, burn is applied by phaser beam and then consumed by overheat, and you are popping eruption to maximise damage. Going back to my comment before, this is pretty complicated and I think some people will love this aspect of the game, but many people are going to find it all a bit too much. At low levels it would be very easy to muddle through without worrying too much about rotations, but everything is pointing to it being essentially for the end game. Now given that there is a 40-hour campaign before then, most people will get their money's worth out of the game, but we could see a wild type drop off in player base as only those raiders, as it were, continue to grind out the expeditions. The final part of the developer's tease on this build was the class tree. But before we go through that, I wanted to let you know of a very cool tool that I found through a Forbes article. The tool allows you to play around with builds for all 4 classes. And as you do so, it displays a pretty simple output for what the build will give you. Now of course, with skills being a huge part of this game, you aren't going to be able to use this to fully min-max your build. And there are a couple of things that need to be added to it. For example, special stats on guns like close range damage that impact on sustained DPS. But overall it is a great tool to get you started, and I will leave a link for you in the description. The class tree for this build focuses heavily on the Tempest branch of the Pyromancer class tree, increasing anomaly power, explosive damage and resistance piercing, while reducing skill cooldowns so that the rotation works as planned. The most interesting thing to me about this class build was how they dipped into the Firestorm branch to pick up additional cooldowns. I think there will be some very viable hybrid builds in this game, which is awesome to see. The final thing I wanted to let you all know about was that a very small patch has been made to the demo, which I think makes it 4 or 5 patches, which is incredible. The patch mainly addressed some crash fixes, minor bug resolutions and back-end improvements. But for the PlayStation, it also addressed an issue with the overly sensitive touchpad. Until next time, Casual out.